Perla Hayes kicked open the glass door with her hip, arms full of cupcake trays, and shouted, "Delivery for oh no, I think I'm in the wrong place." Every head in the sleek, high-rise boardroom turned. Silence fell like a brick. Power suits, clicked pens. A massive screen showing market shares. She wasn't just in the wrong place. She had just barged into a board meeting. On the top floor of a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan, a man at the head of the table slowly stood. Dark suit, sharp jawline, eyes so intense they could slice through concrete. "You're not from catering," he said, voice low, curious. "Nope," Perla said, backing toward the door. "I'm from Patty's Sweets down on Madison. Someone ordered 24 cupcakes for a birthday on floor 32. "This is what floor is this?" 40, said the woman nearest to her, blinking like she couldn't believe what was happening. "Oh my God," Perla muttered. "I took the wrong elevator. I am so sorry. I didn't mean to carry on." "Pretend I was never here." She reached for the handle, but the man at the head of the table raised his hand. "Wait," he said. Perla froze, clutching the pastel boxes like a shield. "You said Patty's Sweets?" "Yeah," she answered, heart thudding. "You've heard of it," he nodded slowly. "Best red velvet in the city." "Damn right," she said before she could stop herself. A few chuckles broke out around the table, the tension cracked. Some guy even clapped. The man in the dark suit smiled. "Leave the cupcakes?" "What? Leave them," he said. "Consider it a thank you for the entertainment." Perla blinked. "Seriously, I'll pay double," he added, already pulling out a black Amex from his wallet. She hesitated, then carefully placed the boxes onto the table, still steaming from the warmth of the bakery. "Okay. But don't blame me if someone eats 3 and falls into a sugar coma." As she turned to leave, he called out again. "What's your name?" She paused in the doorway. "Perla," he nodded once. "I'm Callum King." Her breath caught. She knew that name. Everyone in the city did. Callum King, tech mogul. CEO of King Innovations. Worth over $1 billion, and she just offered him cupcakes and a sugar coma. She hurried out before she could make it worse. "I can't believe I did that," Perla groaned 8 hours later, tossing her apron onto a hook in the bakery's back room. Her best friend and coworker, Jamie, grinned. "You stormed into a billionaire's board meeting and lived to tell the tale. That's iconic. I thought I was going to get tackled by security. You kinda flirted with him." "I did not. You told him not to eat 3 cupcakes." "That's flirting in your language." Perla rolled her eyes but couldn't stop the tiny flutter in her stomach. The way Callum had looked at her like he was actually interested. Like she wasn't just some girl with frosting on her apron and flour on her shoes. Ridiculous. 2 days later, Perla was placing glittery strawberries onto a lemon tart when the bell above the bakery door jingled. She didn't look up. "Be with you in a sec." A pause. Then a voice, smooth and warm. "Take your time. I'm just admiring the craftsmanship." Perla's hand froze mid-strawberry. "No way." She turned. Callum King stood inside Patty's Sweets, hands in the pockets of a navy coat, scanning the display case like he had all the time in the world. "You're stalking me," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "You think I crossed the city for fun?" "Yes," he laughed. "Fair, but no. I was nearby, and I figured I owed you." "For what?" He gestured toward the case. "A cupcake." She folded her arms. "You bought 24 of them. And not one red velvet." Perla tried not to smile. "So you came all the way here just for that?" He looked at her, then not the way a customer stares at a baker, but the way a man stares at a woman he wants to know. "I came here for you." Her heart skipped. "Is that a line?" she asked, voice quiet. "No," he said. "It's a starting point." He came back the next day, and the next. Always around closing time, always dressed like he just walked off a magazine cover, and always just for her. Perla didn't know what to do with it. She wasn't used to men like him. She wasn't used to being noticed by men like him. Especially not billionaires. "You're going to fall in love with him," Jamie whispered one night after he left, having stayed just long enough to ask Perla about her favorite childhood memory. Again, he always asked about her, never talked about himself. "I'm not," Perla insisted. But she was already halfway gone. A week later, he invited her to dinner. "Not coffee," he said. "Not lunch, dinner with wine and conversation." and me trying very hard not to kiss you across the table." She stared at him. "You're serious?" "I'm always serious about wine and kissing." Perla hesitated. You and I'm just, don't say just a baker," he interrupted. "You walked into my boardroom like a hurricane. I haven't stopped thinking about you since." She felt her breath catch. "You don't have to say yes," he added, "but I really hope you do." She looked at him, this man with the sharp jaw and the warmer-than-sunlight eyes, and nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Dinner?" His smile could have melted steel. He picked her up in a sleek black car that smelled like leather and fresh cologne. The driver opened the door. Callum stepped out in a three-piece suit and holding a single sunflower. "For you," he said simply. Perla blinked. "That's my favorite flower." "I know," he said. "You mentioned it." "The second day I saw you." She took the flower, stunned. "You remembered?" "I remember everything about you." And just like that, she was completely gone. The restaurant sat on the edge of the river, glowing with soft lanterns, and the kind of ambience that made Perla feel like she'd wandered into a dream she didn't belong in. The maitre d' greeted Callum by name and whisked them to a secluded table on a terrace overlooking the water. There were only 8 tables, each spaced deliberately as though privacy was part of the menu. Perla sat down slowly, fingers brushing over the crisp linen napkin. "I've never been anywhere with a view like this," she said, eyes tracking the reflection of the city lights rippling across the water. Callum leaned back in his chair, studying her. "That surprises me. It shouldn't. I spend most of my nights making frosting roses and scrubbing flour out of my hair. There's nothing wrong with that." "I know," she said, lifting her menu, "but this. It's a different planet." He watched her a beat longer before saying, "Maybe it's time you visited more often." Perla glanced up. "Is that what this is, a tour?" "No, this is the first time in months I've wanted to share anything real with anyone." The waiter arrived before she could respond. Callum ordered, without looking at the menu, something involving truffle risotto and a bottle of wine she couldn't pronounce. Perla chose the roasted duck because it sounded like something she might never eat again. When the server left, she tilted her head. "You always order without looking," he nodded. "I like knowing what I want." "Must be nice," she muttered. He leaned forward. "You don't know what you want." "I know what I want," she said slowly. "But knowing it doesn't make it easier to reach." "Tell me." "No," she said, laughing quietly. "It's too much for a first date." "Then tell me something else. Tell me what keeps you awake at night." She blinked. "That's somehow worse." Callum didn't flinch. "I don't like small talk, Perla," she set her fork down. "Okay, you want truth." "Sometimes I lie awake thinking about how long it'll take to pay off my mom's medical debt, or whether I can afford to keep the bakery open through winter, or whether I'll be stuck behind that counter until I'm too old to stand." He didn't look away. And sometimes I think I should give it all up and move somewhere small, start over. But then I remember that bakery's the only thing I've ever built by myself." Callum's expression didn't soften, but something about him shifted. "You built that place from the ground up, with 2 part-time jobs and a loan I shouldn't have gotten." "That's not small," he said quietly. "That's 10 times more impressive than anything I've done." She gave him a look. "You own half the skyline. And not one of those buildings tastes like peach cobbler," he said. "I remember the first time I saw you. Everyone in that conference room had their heads buried in projections and strategies, and you walked in like the air didn't belong to them. I walked in because I couldn't read elevator buttons correctly. You walked in with confidence and color and life. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world?" Perla looked down at her glass. "I'm not sure what you're trying to tell me." "I'm trying to tell you," he said, "that for the first time in years someone walked into my life and made me forget my schedule." She didn't know how to respond to that. The food arrived. It was beautifully arranged art on a plate, and Perla tried to focus on the flavors, but her pulse was louder than the river below. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. Not from someone so utterly composed, not from a man who lived in a world where nothing was accidental. They finished the meal under warm lamplight. When they stood, Callum offered his arm without a word. She hesitated, then took it. Outside, the wind curled through the street, cool against her skin. His car waited at the curb, the driver already stepping out. "I'll walk," she said quickly. Callum looked surprised. "You sure?" She nodded. "I want to clear my head." He studied her for a moment. "Let me send someone with you." "I'm not made of glass," she said. He didn't push. "Then at least let me do this." He slipped something into her hand. She opened her fingers, a small card with embossed lettering and a 3-digit number. "What is this?" "The code to the penthouse at the Halston. I keep a suite there during renovations on my place. If you ever need a quiet place to think, it's yours." She stared at it. "You're giving me access to your home." "I'm saying I trust you." "Why?" "Because I already know you won't use it unless you need to." She held the card tightly. "Good night, Callum." His voice was soft. "Good night, Perla." The next morning, she poured herself into the bakery's rhythm. She cracked eggs with a little more force, kneaded dough until her arms ached. Jamie noticed. "You look like you're trying to break the counter, just working through some things." "Callum things?" Perla didn't answer. Jamie leaned against the back table. "He's not like the guys you've dated before." "I haven't dated anyone in nearly 2 years." "Exactly," Jamie said. "So what's the problem?" Perla exhaled. "He gave me a key code to a penthouse." Jamie's eyebrows shot up. "That's not a problem." "That's a romance novel. It's a problem when you don't know someone well enough to understand why they do something like that. Maybe he's trying to show you that he sees you differently." Perla looked down at her flour-covered hands. "Or maybe I'm just the latest distraction." Before Jamie could answer, the bell above the front door chimed. Perla stepped into the front, brushing flour from her shirt, and froze. A woman stood there in a pale suit and heels sharper than her expression. She held an envelope. "You're Perla Hayes?" the woman asked. "Who's asking?" "Lauren Wells. I'm Mr. King's legal counsel." Perla's stomach dropped. "Is he okay?" "He's fine," Lauren said, stepping forward. "This is a confidentiality agreement." Perla stared at it. "Excuse me." Lauren dropped the envelope on the counter. "Standard procedure. Mr. King is a public figure. Any personal involvement requires discretion." "I'm not." Perla stopped. "We aren't, then signing this should be no problem," Lauren said, already turning to leave. Perla didn't touch the envelope. She waited until the door closed before she picked it up. Heart pounding, head spinning, Jamie stepped beside her. "What the hell was that?" Perla didn't answer. She just stared at the envelope and wondered if she'd wandered into something far more dangerous than she thought. Rain slicked the sidewalks by late afternoon, and Perla walked the long block from the bakery to the subway with the envelope still untouched in her bag. She hadn't told Callum about the visit from his legal counsel. She wasn't even sure she wanted to. Everything that had unfolded between them had felt strange but genuine, the least carefully constructed thing she'd experienced in years. That envelope felt like steel bars around it. She reached the station steps but didn't descend. Instead, she turned, walked another block, then pushed through the glass doors of a boutique hotel she'd passed a dozen times before. A concierge greeted her with an expectant nod. She slid the card from her coat pocket. "The Halston," she said. "Penthouse code 398. The concierge didn't blink. "Take the private lift on your left." Inside the elevator, the air changed. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft mechanical hum climbing higher and higher. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space that seemed to exist outside the rest of the city. It wasn't ostentatious, no gold, no marble lions, but it was unmistakably expensive. Sleek furniture in charcoal and cream, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, and a faint scent of cedar and something warm that she couldn't name but felt like him. She didn't wander, didn't touch anything. Just stood at the edge of the living room, staring out at the city that had both raised her and tried to grind her down. Then she pulled the envelope from her bag and tossed it onto the glass coffee table. The door opened behind her. "I was hoping you'd come here," Callum said. She didn't turn. "Your lawyer thinks I'm a liability. She's overcautious. She handed me a contract like I was a potential scandal." She doesn't speak for me. Perla turned then, slowly, but she acts on your behalf. He stepped inside, wet coat already discarded on a nearby chair. His shirt clung to him slightly from the rain and his expression was unreadable. I didn't authorize that, he said. She said it was standard procedure. It might be for someone else, he said, not for you. Perla folded her arms. So what am I? Callum moved closer, hands at his sides, not reaching for her. You're the only person in the last 5 years who's made me laugh without trying. The only one who's ever asked me about something that wasn't tied to a number or a result. The only woman I've ever wanted to see every day without knowing why. She searched his face. Why didn't you tell her to stay out of it? I didn't know she'd gone to you, he said. She knew your name, but not how I felt about you. You have a lot of people making decisions for you. I'm used to delegating. It's how I built everything. And what happens when someone doesn't follow the plan? Callum's jaw tightened. Then I changed the plan. Perla took a breath. You know what scares me? Not that you're rich or powerful or that women like that think I don't belong in your life. What scares me is that this might not be real for you, that this is just something you're doing because you're bored. He stepped forward now, slow and deliberate. I don't waste time on things that don't matter. You barely know me. I know you stay late at the bakery because you don't trust anyone else to lock it up right. I know you hum under your breath when you're focused. I know you keep a sketchbook in your kitchen drawer where you plan cake designs you're too busy to make. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met and you still think you haven't done enough. Perla's throat tightened. I know you, he said. And I want to know more. She looked down at the envelope. I'm not signing anything. You don't need to. Even if this ends badly, Callum didn't flinch. Then it ends honestly. She nodded once, sharp and sure. Then we're not pretending anymore. No more pretending, he said. She stepped closer. Then stop treating me like something delicate. I never thought you were delicate, he said. I thought you were fire wrapped in velvet. Perla's breath hitched. He reached out finally and tucked a damp strand of hair behind her ear. And I'm not afraid of fire. She kissed him first. It wasn't sweet or hesitant. It was breathless and full of every word she hadn't known how to say. His hands found her waist, grounding her, and the city outside the windows fell away. When they pulled apart, her forehead rested against his chest, and she could feel the rapid beat of his heart. I've never done this before, she whispered. Fallen? No, she said, smiling faintly. Fallen this fast. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Then let's make sure it's worth it. She didn't stay the night. She didn't need to. When she left the penthouse, she felt steadier than she had in weeks. The next morning, she opened the bakery alone. Jamie had taken the day off to visit her sister in Jersey, and Perla welcomed the solitude. She rolled out dough, prepped fillings, and let the rhythm of her hands drown out the noise in her head. Just before noon, Callum walked in. He wasn't in a suit. He wore jeans, a dark sweater, and a scarf wrapped carelessly around his neck. There was flour on her cheek and probably in her hair, but he didn't seem to care. He held a paper bag in one hand and set it on the counter. I brought you lunch, he said. She raised an eyebrow. You cook now? No, he said. I hired someone to make it, she laughed, pulling off her apron. At least you're honest. They sat in the back alley behind the bakery, on 2 old crates she kept for deliveries. He passed her a container of soup and a sandwich wrapped in parchment. You eat back here often? He asked. When I need to breathe. He looked around at the cracked brick and graffiti. It's kind of perfect, she glanced at him. You're not what I expected. Do you want to know the truth? He asked, always. I didn't expect you either. I thought my life was already full. Then you walked in and made the rest of it feel empty. Perla swallowed. You're making this very hard to stay grounded. You were never meant to stay grounded, he said. You just forgot how to fly. They sat in silence for a while after that, sharing soup and the kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. And somewhere in the middle of the noise of the city, Perla began to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't going to end in heartbreak. The gala was a blur of diamonds and tailored tuxedos, but all Callum saw was the woman standing just inside the entrance. brushing raindrops from her shoulders like she didn't care that every head had turned to watch her. She hadn't wanted to come. "This isn't me," she'd said the night before, holding the invitation like it might bite her. "I don't belong in rooms like that. You belong anywhere you walk into," he'd told her. "And I want you there beside me." Now, as she stepped forward, her heels echoing softly on the marble floor, he couldn't help the way his chest tightened. She wore confidence like armor tonight, but her eyes flicked to him the moment she spotted him across the room, uncertain, searching like she needed reassurance he was still her anchor. He met her halfway. "I was beginning to think you'd run," he said, offering his arm. "I almost did," Perla replied, looping her arm through his. "But you bribed me with the promise of champagne and a string quartet. They're on the terrace, but I have something better." Her eyes narrowed playfully. "If you say caviar, I'm leaving." "No," he said. "Just a surprise." He guided her through the crowd, pausing only to exchange the briefest nods with investors and executives who tried to draw him into conversations. Perla watched with growing awareness these were the people who lived in his world, the ones who spoke in percentages and mergers. And yet he barely looked at them. Every glance, every word was for her. They stepped out onto the terrace where soft lights twinkled along the balustrade and a cellist played something slow and aching. The space was quiet, distant from the buzz of the party inside. Perla leaned on the railing. "So this is where billionaires hide when they get bored." Callum stood beside her. "This is where I come when I need to think clearly." She turned to face him. "And you brought me here because I don't want you to think you're just passing through my life. I don't. I need to be sure." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, not fancy, not embossed, just ink on print. She frowned as she took it. "What is this?" "I bought the building," her breath caught. "What building?" "Patty's Suites, and the 3 floors above it." Her eyes flew to his. "You didn't." "I did, and I'm transferring ownership to you." Perla stared at the paper in her hands, stunned into silence. "It's not charity," he added. "It's an investment in you, in your future. No more worrying about rent doubling or greedy landlords waiting to flip the property. It's yours now. Do what you want with it. Expand, renovate. Or leave it exactly as it is. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stop doubting you deserve more." She looked like she might cry, but instead she folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her clutch. "This doesn't feel real." "It is." She turned back toward the skyline. "I used to work 17-hour days wondering if I'd have to close the bakery before I turned 30. Now you're telling me I own the building. You earned it." She shook her head slowly. "No one's ever believed in me like this." "I do," Callum said. "And I need you to know something else." She looked up. "I've spent most of my adult life building things people said were impossible, but none of it compares to what I feel when I look at you. I didn't plan for this. I didn't see you coming. But now that you're here." He hesitated, then stepped closer, pulling a small box from his coat pocket and opening it. Perla gasped. Inside was a ring, delicate, vintage, unlike anything she'd expected. An oval sapphire framed by 2 small diamonds set in gold. Not flashy, not loud, just quietly, irreversibly beautiful. "I'm not asking you to marry me tonight," he said softly. "I know how fast this has been. But I'm asking you to let me love you for real, every day, without hiding behind meetings or fear or the space between our worlds." She stared at the ring, then at him. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You're serious?" "I've never been more certain of anything." She didn't take the ring. Not yet. Instead, she reached up, cupped his face in her hands, and kissed him so gently it made the rest of the world dim. When she pulled back, her eyes were shining. "You already have me," she said. "With or without that ring," he smiled. "Then take it when you're ready." "I'm ready," she whispered, sliding the ring onto her finger. Inside, the music shifted to something grand and sweeping. The doors opened and people began drifting onto the terrace, champagne glasses in hand, conversations rising like a tide. Callum leaned in. "Let's get out of here." "Where?" "I bought a place in Montauk," he said. "Quiet, ocean view, no board meetings." She laughed, light and wild. You're insane. I'm in love. And you think I'll just go? I think you'll say yes. She took his hand. I will, but only if you let me drive. He raised an eyebrow. You don't even know what car I brought. I don't care, I want the keys. He handed them over without hesitation. They walked through the crowd together, him in his understated suit, her in a storm-colored dress that moved like water. Heads turned again, but neither of them noticed. Outside, the car waited. She opened the door, slid behind the wheel, and looked up at him with a grin. Buckle up, mister. King. He got in beside her. As they pulled away from the curb, the city blurred behind them, towers of glass and steel fading into the night. Ahead, the road stretched toward something neither of them had planned for but both of them wanted. And for the first time in a long time, Perla Hayes wasn't running from anything. She was driving toward something real, something hers. The ocean air carried the scent of salt and something sweet, and Perla couldn't tell if it was the sea breeze or the stack of warm cinnamon rolls she'd pulled from the oven. The kitchen in Montauk was bright and airy, flooded with golden light spilling through the wide windows. Outside, the waves curled toward the shore in slow, lazy rolls. Callum walked in barefoot, still damp from a morning swim, his hair tousled and his shirt clinging to his chest in soft cotton folds. I know that smell, he said, leaning in to kiss the side of her neck. You know every smell, Perla replied, setting the rolls on the cooling rack. You have a freakishly good nose. I know the scent of you when you're happy, he murmured, and you smell like a damn sunrise right now. She laughed, pushing him playfully away with a wooden spoon. You're going to make me burn the glaze. He stole one of the smaller rolls before she could stop him and took a bite, then winced dramatically. They're hot, she said, rolling her eyes. Worth it, he said around a mouthful. Still better than anything I've ever eaten in a boardroom. She wiped her hands and leaned against the counter, watching him. The man who once lived in the middle of towering buildings and impossible expectations now looked more at home in a beach house with flour on his face than in any of the glossy magazines he used to appear in. You've changed, she said. I've stopped pretending I want the things I used to chase. What do you want now? He looked at her, and there was no hesitation. A life that doesn't feel like I'm racing against myself. She crossed the kitchen and rested her head against his chest. I used to think I had to fight for everything, that nothing would ever come without a price. You were right, he said. But sometimes the price is just letting yourself believe you deserve good things. And you think we're a good thing? I think we're the best thing either of us ever stumbled into, he said, and I don't want to stumble through it anymore. She looked up at him, heart skipping. Then let's stop waiting. For what? For everything to be perfect, for the timing to be right, for someone to tell us it's okay. He held her tighter. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I don't want to plan a wedding a year from now in a ballroom I've never seen. I want to marry you here, today, barefoot, flower-streaked and sunburned, his breath caught. You're serious. I'm completely serious. He kissed her then, slow and deep, like the moment deserved a pause before it changed everything. I'll make the call, he said when they broke apart. She raised an eyebrow. You know someone who can make this happen on 3 hours' notice? I know someone who owes me a favor and has a minister's license. By the time the sun began to lean westward, the backyard had been transformed. A simple arch of driftwood and white linen stood facing the ocean. A few chairs, a scattering of wildflowers, and the sound of waves crashing in applause. Jamie arrived, breathless and teary-eyed, carrying a bouquet she'd pulled together from a local market. You really went and did this without me, she said, hugging Perla tightly. You're here now, Perla said. That's all that matters. Callum appeared in a white shirt and rolled sleeves, barefoot, holding 2 rings in his palm like they were the most precious things he'd ever owned. There were no crowds, no photographers, just a handful of people who mattered and the wind curling through their hair as they stood together, hands clasped, eyes locked. The officiant smiled. There's no script here, just say what's in your heart. Callum looked at her. I used to think love was a risk I couldn't afford, that if I let myself need someone, I'd lose the edge that built my empire. Then you came in, covered in flour, and knocked my world off its axis. Now I know, true power isn't control, it's choosing someone every day. And I choose you. Perla's voice trembled, but she didn't look away. I've spent my whole life building walls because I thought no one would ever stay long enough to break them, but you didn't break them. You waited, you listened. You didn't try to change me, you just loved me. And that's more than I ever thought I'd get. They exchanged rings. There was no music, no fanfare. Just the sound of waves and one perfect moment of stillness as they kissed, sealing a promise neither had expected to make so soon, and yet somehow had always been heading toward. That night they danced alone on the porch. No shoes, no music, just the rhythmic sound of the tide and the rustle of linen curtains in the breeze. Later, curled in bed with her head on his chest, Perla traced lazy circles across his collarbone. "You think we'll ever go back?" she asked. "To the city, to everything we left behind. I think we'll visit," he said. "Remind ourselves where we came from, but I don't think we'll live there again. You really gave it all up." "I didn't give anything up," he said. "I traded it for something better." She smiled against his skin. "You're still the man who can buy a building with a phone call. And you're still the woman who changed my entire life with a tray of cupcakes." The lights dimmed. The waves rolled in. And the only sound left was the quiet, steady rhythm of two hearts finally at peace. Years later, the bakery expanded into the floor above. Perla taught weekend classes to local kids who wanted to learn how to bake. The storefront never changed much, save for the new sign above the door, Hayes and King. Callum spent his mornings reading by the window and his afternoons helping with deliveries. He never returned to the boardroom. He didn't need to. Every evening they walked the beach, hand in hand, barefoot in the sand they now called home. And every night, without fail, he kissed her like he was still falling, because he was.